Here is Chanel Cruz.
I was around 8 years old in my elementary class when we were reading in our social studies book. We must have been reading something about the United States and our ties to our neighboring country, Mexico. As we were reading the passage, we collectively got to a word in the passage we did not know. Aguila? What is an aguila? I remember trying to decipher this word on the paper, but it seemed to me my teacher did not know either, because when I recognized that this word was in Spanish and said, oh, this word is águila, which means eagle, my teacher dismissively told me, it doesn't really matter. He did not tell the class the new or correct way to say the word in the passage which I had just mentioned, but I remember the excitement on my face when I was even able to recognize such an advanced Spanish word. So this lesson did matter to me. I am one of the prime examples of children of immigrants who did not teach their children their language. So being able to point out a word that my whole class did not know was a proud moment to bring some knowledge to them. Anyway, flash forward, I would now know the word águila and be able to recall many other words in Spanish easily at this point. This silly story seems to be stuck in my head, but for reasons I'd like to share with you guys. One of the quotes I think about in my journey of learning Spanish is, if you want to get to know a country, read its writers, by Aminata Forna. What I've grown to witness throughout my life and having traveled to Mexico, Honduras, the Dominican Republic, and so many other places in the United States is that there are so many different ways to get to know countries and understand aspects of culture different than your own. In terms of Spanish-speaking countries, the more I aged and was able to appreciate my own Mexican and Honduran culture, the more I longed to be connected to amazing people and be able to naturally experience the world. One of the ways I did this was through learning Spanish. When I was younger, I was able to understand and say phrases in Spanish to certain limits and certain extents. It was typical for me to hear Spanish but respond in English. And then growing older and only really hearing English with my family and at school, I grew really stunted in my Spanish-speaking abilities. Despite this, I put a lot of effort into learning Spanish through watching multiple telenovelas like Rosa de Guadalupe, by being active in my Spanish classes, listening to a lot of reggaeton, banda, cumbia, and speaking to myself in Spanish a lot. So, I've improved in Spanish a lot regardless of how late in the game I feel I've arrived. A message I want to give to you guys is that despite this, there are many reasons to learn different language. Well, based on my own experiences of learning Spanish, some data from NASFA, the Association of International Educators, 280,716 students studied abroad and traveled to places and got credit for studying in many regions. While they vary based on popularity, some of these host regions include Africa, Asia, the United States, and many other countries and regions. While it's not a guarantee that everyone will study abroad, I do recommend it. Although you cannot just read literature, there are many other ways to get to know and analyze aspects of culture different than your own. In terms of studying abroad, just visiting other countries and different regions isn't enough. Reading literature in a different language can totally make your experience studying abroad more worthwhile. Instead of just visiting and sightseeing, reading literature in a different language increases your vocabulary to speak to locals and be able to get rid of ignorance by learning of a country's unique history and struggles. I have read stories by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, Federico Garcia Lorca, Carlos Fuentes, and have many other books in a different language on my reading list. I have learned of conditions of periods of rebellion, bad economic conditions, the usage of magical realism, and so many other contexts of Latin America. A book I've been reading has a really interesting quote in it. It is from a book in Spanish by Carlos Fuentes called The Death of Artemio Cruz. It goes like, "You will open your hands and feel the sweat of your palms, and perhaps you'll remember you were born without lines of life or fortune, of life or of love. You will be born with an open hand, but it will suffice for you to be born so that in a few hours, this blank space will be filled with signs, with rays, with announcements. You will die with dense, worn out lines. But it will be enough for that when you die, in a few hours, all the traces of your destiny will have died with your hands." This quote's even better in Spanish because it embodies the context of the author and the socio-political context of Mexico following the Mexican Revolution. Whereas in the United States, our curriculum isn't geared to learn about other cultures and historical events of other countries, how would we learn if we're not looking? With this book, I was listening to the protagonist, Artemio Cruz, recount his life in non-chronological order. I'm putting the pieces together of how this humble Mexican soldier who fought with revolutionaries early on in his life gets corrupted as he ages with his own life decision and chooses a life of greed, bad morals, and everything else he used to fight against. I had to do my research as well on historical figures such as Pancho Villa, Francisco Madero, and the Zapatas to fully comprehend this text. I also learned a lot of advanced Spanish vocabulary, but what really stood out to me was that I could understand the passion and underlying cultural themes better by reading through the language's lens. The lens I'm talking about gives perspective. Perspective. If you can dream of being a global citizen, if you can dream of traveling to all the places you wanted to, dream to understand. Dream to understand. There are so many people out there. How can you fully know people if you don't know their language, their culture, their people's struggles, and the history that they face up to the current day? Every day we make a choice to fill our blank spaces, the blank spaces of our hands. I say, be the person that accepts Aguila. Be the person that tries to gain knowledge from literature and language learning. Our lives can be filled with knowledge and skills that we worked hard for and can use in our daily lives. Now that I can properly speak Spanish, I occasionally will be at the DMV and translate to the person next to me English just because they need help. Or I'll haggle with sellers in the Dominican Republic because I want a lower price. Or I'll read literature in Spanish just to improve my Spanish skills. So, if you're thinking of mastering a foreign language like you've always wanted to, do it, and read literature in that language too. Thank you.